It was, at least for residents of Long Island, New York, the crime of the century when 1-month-old Peter Weinberger was kidnapped from his suburban home on July 4, 1956. Certainly the fallout from the incident reached national proportions. This child was not from a well-to-do family, like the Lindberghs. This child came from a middle-class family in suburbia, where people weren't afraid of being targeted by extortionists. The Weinberger kidnapping struck fear in the hearts of average Americans. People started locking their doors. Almost overnight, an entire country lost its sense of security. The Weinberger case also resulted in new legislation signed by President Eisenhower that reduced the FBI's waiting period in kidnapping cases from 7 days to 24 hours. On that particular July 4th in 1956, Betty Weinberger wrapped her month-old son Peter in a receiving blanket and placed him in his carriage on the patio of their home in Westbury, New York. She then went inside for a few minutes while he slept. When Mrs. Weinberger came back to check on her son, all she found was an empty carriage and a ransom note. In the note, the kidnapper apologized for his actions, but said he needed money and asked for $2,000. He promised the baby would be returned safe and happy the following day if his demand was met. Despite the kidnapper's threat to kill the baby at the first wrong move, she called the Nassau County Police Department. The ransom note reads, "Attention," it said. "I'm sorry this had to happen, but I am in bad need of money, and couldn't get it any other way. Don't tell anyone or go to the police about this, because I am watching you closely. I am scared stiff, and will kill the baby at your first wrong move, your babysitter." After the kidnapping, Morris Weinberger requested that the newspapers hold off printing the story of his son's kidnapping. All but one newspaper granted Mr. Weinberger's request. The kidnapping made the front page of the New York Daily News. By the following day, news reporters swarmed the drop-off area where the kidnapper requested the money be left. Police left the phony ransom package at the spot, but the kidnapper never showed up. On July 10th, 6 days after the kidnapping, the kidnapper called the Weinberger home 2 separate times, with additional instructions on where to take the money. He didn't show up at either location. At the second drop site, police searched a blue cloth bag found alongside a curb. Inside the bag was a handwritten note, apparently from the kidnapper, telling the parents where to find the baby if everything goes smooth. The note was examined by experts who agreed that the original ransom note and the second note were written by the same person. On July 11th, after the required 7-day waiting period, the FBI joined the case. Its first step was to establish a temporary headquarters for its employees from the New York office, agent and support in Mineola, Long Island. The temporary headquarters, which operated 24 hours a day, was under the personal direction of the special agent in charge of the New York office. The only evidence officials had up until then were the ransom notes. Handwriting experts from the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C., traveled to New York and gave special agents a crash course in handwriting analysis. These newly trained investigators began the task of examining the huge volume of handwriting specimens maintained by the New York State Motor Vehicle Bureau, federal and state probation offices, schools, aircraft plants, and various municipalities. After examining and eliminating almost 2 million samples, the search ended on August 22, 1956. An agent at the U.S. Probation Office in Brooklyn noted a similarity between the ransom notes and writing in the probation file of one Angelo LAMARCA. LaMarca had been arrested by the Treasury Department for bootlegging. As investigators soon learned, LaMarca was a taxi dispatcher and truck driver who lived with his wife and 2 children in Plainview, New York. He lived in a house he couldn't afford, had many unpaid bills, and was being threatened by a loan shark. On July 4, 1956, he had found himself driving around Westbury, 7 miles away, trying to figure out how to get the money he needed. When he happened on the Weinberger house, Mrs. Weinberger was leaving her son in the baby carriage to go into her house. On impulse, LaMarca scribbled a ransom note in his truck, snatched Peter, and drove off. On August 23, 1956, LaMarca was arrested at his home by FBI agents and Nassau County Police. Although he first denied any involvement in the kidnapping of Peter Weinberger, he confessed when confronted with the handwriting comparisons. LaMarca told investigators he went to the first drop site the day after the kidnapping, with the baby in the car, but he was scared away by all of the press and police in the area. He drove away, abandoned the baby alive in some heavy brush just off a highway exit, and went home. A search of the area by FBI agents and Nassau County Police ensued. An FBI agent spotted a diaper pin, then the decomposed remains of Peter Weinberger. The heartrending search was over. Since LaMarca had crossed no state lines, he had not violated the federal kidnapping statute, and so he was turned over to Nassau County authorities for state prosecution. In late 1956, he was tried and convicted by a jury on kidnapping and murder charges. The jury returned its verdict without a recommendation of leniency. On December 14, 1956, he was sentenced to death. After a number of legal appeals, including one to the Supreme Court, Angelo LaMarca was executed at Sing Sing Prison on August 7, 1958. He was pronounced dead 3 minutes later. His last meal had consisted of fried chicken, French fried potatoes, vegetables, ice cream, and coffee. Prison officials stated that he repeatedly shouted, "Maybe they'll save me yet," in the hours leading up to his execution. Shortly before his execution, LaMarca said his final goodbye to his children. They got along fine. Donna LaMarca, one of the children of Angelo LaMarca, said he told them to do well in school and to take care of me. Is too young to understand, but knows what's happening. At his execution, a silent but visibly frightened LaMarca was accompanied by a Catholic chaplain. He was not observed to have said anything in the death chamber except quiet muttered responses to the chaplain's prayers, and one comment to a guard placing a strap over his eyes and face. "What are you trying to do, choke me?" Otherwise, he made no final statement. There were 35 witnesses to his execution, one of whom was Edward Caron. Caron later recalled, "I didn't particularly want to be there, but Betty Weinberger and Frank Gullotta asked me to go, so I felt I had to do it." LaMarca expressed neither remorse nor any other emotion. He was accompanied by a Catholic chaplain, the Rev. George McKinney, reading the 23rd Psalm in Latin. LaMarca occasionally muttered a response to the prayer. He wore black loafers, dark gray trousers, and a white shirt open at the neck. As they reached the electric chair, the priest gave LaMarca a crucifix to kiss. A half-dozen guards eased him into the chair. They strapped his arms and lifted his face to receive a heavy leather mask that covered his eyes and a strap that covered his mouth. Moments later, with the preparations completed, 2,000 volts of electricity shot through his body. When the electricity was turned off, an auditing physician, George McCracken, approached LaMarca. He placed a stethoscope to LaMarca's chest. "This man is dead," he pronounced. Angelo John LAMARCA was 33 years old at the time of his execution. Thank you for watching Death Row.